Hello and welcome to the Monopoly Challenge. My name is Matthew Hannigan. I'm a principal consultant working out in the UK. I've been with MicroStrategy since 2008. Monopoly is a favourite game of our family, and it consists of a game of chance arranged around a board on which you can buy property. There is cash, and the idea is you buy and sell property and you charge rents to your co-players. But having played it for a long time, I think the game has limitations. It's difficult to track a player's net worth in real time. There's a limited cash supply. There's no liability concept, and there's no view of the bigger game picture. And on top of that, it'd be nice to be able to model real-world scenarios. Okay, so that's quite ambitious, but that got me thinking, and I did some modeling, and I basically reduced really the core of the game to this engine here, which is basically a transaction model that consists of, well, basically there's transaction records, the flow of funds from one entity to another for a given turn and at a given time. Okay, so what's the art of the possible? And it's a number of challenges. So the idea was to build the application in stages, each one answering a specific challenge. Challenge 1, can you dematerialize the Monopoly Bank? Challenge 2, can you explore financial concepts in a fun way? Challenge 3, can you dematerialize the entire game? And above all, can you do it all with MicroStrategy? Well, the answer is yes. Okay, so let's look at the first challenge, which is to dematerialize the bank. So the idea there is that there's no more cash, no physical cash, that's gone. Okay. So what I did to start with is that based on the transaction model that I showed you earlier on, I built a database, a MicroStrategy schema, and a couple of interfaces. There's the player interface that shows you a summary for each player up till 4 for now, and you can see that they've got their cash in hand, the property, their assets in total, any liabilities. See, this one's got a loan there, and their net worth. Okay, and then the next interface was the banker interface, which is where we say that we've got the from entity. I don't know if you remember the diagram. So player 1 to player 2, for instance, okay? Then the type, is it a loan, rent, is it income? The category. So what you do is you select all of these, you pick the property that applies to it, you put the turn and the value, and you click on submit. Okay, we're going to demonstrate that in a second. There you go. So here we are, we're in MicroStrategy 2020. The application is held in this folder called FatCat, because that's the name of the application. It's gone through 2 upgrades, because I started on it quite a while ago, and it's done quite well. So let's start with the player interface. There we go, let's go into presentation mode. And let's go full screen. There you go. Right, so that's basically what would be shown on a monitor if we were playing with a physical board. So we'd have that in the background, and we'd be able to see the position of each player. So for up to 4 players for now. So we can see how much cash the player has, how much property, the total assets, any loans. So that's a new concept, and their net worth. And so that helps explain the concept of the difference between, for instance, your cash in hand and your net worth. Quite useful for the youngsters. Other things we can do with this quickly, just go to property holdings, and that for each player shows their property portfolio. And look, hyperintelligence is working. So I've keyed hyperintelligence on every single board position, including the properties. So we'll see that come up later on in the application. Let's have a look at an individual player situation. So we've got a metric selector there that we can actually run for a given data set. You've seen the auto refresh at play there. If we just look at player 1 net worth, we can see we've got net worth of this. These are the transactions that have concerned this player, and that's again a summary of their property portfolio with hyperintelligence working. So we've got one for each player. Player 3 is interesting because player 3 has a loan, so they should have liabilities. So let's see what there is. Yes, there are some liabilities. The loan was taken out. Here's the loan transaction, and they've done a property purchase of the Old Kent Road. Just wait for the auto refresh to stop. The dossier is set to auto refresh every 30 seconds. Okay, what else do we have? So we've got the status for free parking. So let me click on the screen. So that shows you the ins and outs of free parking and what you can get when you land on it now. That's going to be interesting for complete games because we'll be able to see all the flows of cash from one entity to another. And what's not shown here, because I didn't do it for this game, but ideally the Fat Cat Bank would have been endowed with a substantial amount of cash from the Magic Money Tree. And then if the bank runs out of money, the Magic Money Tree can give it again. So that again introduces an important concept. We've got a property register with all the properties, all the spaces on the board actually, but we can see for each property the purchase value, the rent, and so on and so forth. Finally, we can keep an eye on the bank, so we can see whether the bank is going bust or not. We can see the transactions that go out and in from the bank. Okay, so that's it for the player interface. What we're going to do now is go back to game summary, leave that on the screen, and I'll then show you, hopefully, from the iPad, the impact of putting a transaction through. Right, so we're set up to record on two devices. I haven't quite worked out how to do the screen capture on an iPad yet. That's the next step. But just to show you that at the moment we've got the player interface showing the player states at the moment. And I'm going to cut in some footage I'm taking on a separate device, which will show us what happens with the iPad. So what we're going to do is that, yes, player 4 is going to pay rent to player 3. Okay, so let's do that. Player 4, first of all, from entity to player 3. That will be rent. That will be rent as well. We just need to work out which property it's going to be. So hang on a second, we'll just check that. A little bit of work needed to be done on there. Where was my £4? £4. Right, okay, we're all set. Okay, so I'm now going to click on submit. Wonderful, that's happened. So now I've done this, we should get the... Yeah, there you go. So it's done it. It's increased the value of player 3. So they've got £4 extra, and the value for player 4 has dropped by £4. Now we have the second challenge, which is to make finance fun. It's important to make finance fun because a lot of people find it boring, but it has a big impact on our lives if they don't work for us. So what I'd like to do is stimulate an understanding of finance in players of the game to make them curious about grasping the concepts and eventually challenging and changing the ways of finance to prevent its worst excesses. So the idea is to extend the monopoly model, and I aim to start players on the road to understanding the money supply, so the magic money tree there that you have there, key measures, so cash in hand, net worth, net liabilities, the impact and risk of lending and borrowing, planning and forecasting, and then data and analytical concepts. But then, well, 2020 happened. So our testing schedule for the game disappeared. I managed to master the art of making bread. We tried to play Monopoly remotely with a camera on the board, but it was unwieldy, and so that leads us on to the next challenge, really, which is how do we dematerialize the entire game? So it's time to go virtual. We needed to be able to play remotely. So I made a MicroStrategy document that plots the player position on an image on the board. I implemented turn and location logic and created some random number metrics to simulate the dice. I used transaction services to capture the dice results and update the player positions. So we're now going to look at the game interface. So that's the dematerialization of the Monopoly board. We're going to click on that document here. Right, so what we've got is we've got an image of the Monopoly board, and then we've got grids all around that represent the player position. Now, each grid has a view filter that will only paint the player if that player is currently in that position. Quite simple, really. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a go for player 2, and we're just going to put turn number 21. just because I can. So what that's done is it worked out that for player 2, first dice was 1, second dice was 4. Player 2 is here in position 18, is going to move 5 spaces and is going to end up in position 23, which is this one here, Fleet Street. All right, look, we've got hyper intelligence working. Wonderful. So let's submit. And there we go. Player 2 is now in Fleet Street. Okay. So what we can do is we can move on to player 3. Turn 22, and then what's that? So it's worked out that for player 3, first dice was 5, second dice was 4. Player 3 is currently in Bond Street, position 34. The new position, having moved on by 9, would be 3, so we'll end up in Whitechapel Road. Let's do that. And there he is in Whitechapel Road. Quick look at the hypercard. Yep, all good. So you would have to pay rent to someone if it belonged to anybody. So yeah, that's the board interface. That leads to further thinking. Could we actually merge the bank and the board interface and have, functions depending on the player role? That will be for the next version. But that's it for the game interface. So the final challenge is, can it all be done using MicroStrategy out of the box? Well, emphatically yes. All the components I used are built with solid, tried and tested technologies at the core. We used dossiers, documents, transaction services, mobile and hyperintelligence, amongst others, but it's all out of the box. So how is this application or this game going to evolve? I think it depends on the time I have available. But I'd like to use the REST API to handle game transactions. I'd like to improve the user experience, like have mobile apps for players, really upgrade the game and turn logic, improve the graphics. And then I think we need to introduce some machine learning, because we're going to be collecting game data and patterns, which I think will be fascinating. We need to support concurrent games and have registered users. And then finally, we just need to implement it as a cloud solution so that everyone can play it. But you know what? Regardless, it will still all be out of the box. Okay. So I'd like you to take this away. You can do extraordinary things with MicroStrategy. You can do it in production at scale. But you need to think beyond the grid. There's never really been a better time to innovate, and MicroStrategy is the platform to do it. Thank you.